La Voice, breathe.
Okay, so good morning,
Join the meeting.
everyone, and welcome to the quick overview of the risk awareness tool for support coordinators. Again, my name is Jessa, and I'm going to be the host of today's training. And I just wanted to say I appreciate your attendance. And I also have two other people who are kind of helping coordinate this meeting today. Our highly anticipated, very special guest is Eric Williams. Eric, would you like to come on and say hello quickly?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. We're glad you're here. We've heard you. We know that more guidance is needed. So we partnered with OIH to kind of bring today's training together and bring that to you. And we hope that this is helpful in supporting your understanding of current expectations. I do want to mention that we held some focus groups with support coordinators last year. And out of those focus groups, we've initiated a quality improvement initiative to integrate the RAT into the part 2 of the ISP. So we'll be working in the coming months on developing that process alongside CSB representatives and provider representatives. And so as more information is available, we will share that out with the community. Our hope is to streamline health information and make it easier and more effective in ISP planning. So thank you for being with us today.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And then really quickly, we have Catherine Rice on. She is another RNCC in the Office of Integrated Health who handles Regions 1, and she is going to be on here kind of helping man the chat box if there are any questions that she can get to really quickly. Kay, do you have the ability to say hi really quickly?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be with you today. Lots of great information I'm sure we're going to hear.
Okay. All right. So with all that ado, let's go ahead and get started. So again, just a quick reminder that we want to be courteous of all the other participants who are on the call. So please make sure to keep your microphones muted and your cameras off. Just a reminder to locate the chat box. And here's a little screenshot of what it may look like on your computer, so that you can place your questions during the training in the chat box so that we can get those answered. And that we'll be able to send out that Q&A document to the email address that you use to register for this training once we've concluded both of these trainings. And lastly, just a reminder that this training is being recorded. So the purpose of this training is to facilitate awareness of risk and identifying triggers and thresholds, specifically due to the RAT tool and how DBHS is using that tool, the risk awareness tool. If you've not heard of the RAT, that's the acronym for it, for risk identification and potential risk identification for individuals. The RAT was developed using research and evidence-based best practice guidelines, and it's intended to reduce the risk of health status or mortality in the folks that we serve, and also to serve as a tool to facilitate communication around healthcare needs with others and the treatment team, as well as healthcare professionals. So risk awareness is essentially identifying and mitigating critical components of an individual's health and safety. And so we liken it to a piece of Swiss cheese that has holes in it. The more holes or potential or identified risk, the greater the chances of preventing harm. So we don't want people to kind of fall into those holes and that information get lost. So we want to minimize a person's risk by identifying what those potential holes are as soon as possible. So we also want to identify potential health and safety risks and any available health resources. We want to encourage critical conversations about potential identified health risks. We want to identify potential risk factors in each of the covered areas, which we'll go over here shortly. We want to outline actions based on the identified risks. We want to identify qualified healthcare professionals that can help us. We want to set target dates for connecting with that qualified healthcare professional. And we want to assign responsible parties for follow-up activities. So when do we complete the RAT? The RAT is best to be completed during the annual planning meeting. Ideally, the work on completing the RAT should occur prior to that meeting so that every member of the treatment team is ready to review and provide input at that time. It's strongly encouraged to revisit the RAT as an individual support needs change throughout the year and are updated as needed in the ISP and the Part 5s. However, the RAT's only required to be completed annually. Completing the RAT around annual planning allows recommended support instructions to be included in the ISP Part 3 and Part 5 as appropriate. And in addition to being completed annually, the RAT could be completed on an as-needed basis should a person experience significant health changes. So who the key stakeholders can be and possible information sources for completing the risk awareness tool. So of course, key stakeholders would include the individual, you as the support coordinator, family members, providers, from whether it's day support, employment, residential, nursing, etc. And then places that you might find some valuable information to use to complete the RAT would include recent hospital records, physicals, discharge summaries, previous ISPs, reports from caregivers or families, historical information, quarterly reviews, behavioral assessments, psychosocial records, and a whole host of other documents that we can have to review as we work to complete the RAT. So what is the RAT? The risk awareness tool is a 7-page document with 7 medical risk awareness sections, which are broken through sections A through G, and 4 behavioral risk awareness sections, which are sections H through K. So most of you are familiar with the tool itself and how to complete it, but I did want to give a brief overview of how to actually complete the tool. So the tool is broken up into a 3-step process. So step 1, the question on the tool asks you, has the individual been diagnosed by a medical professional with the identified risk in the past plan year? And the question, you're prompted to say yes or no to that. You can say, yes, they've been diagnosed with this, or no, they have not been diagnosed. If yes is checked, there must be an outcome included in the individual's ISP, and then you proceed to the next section. However, if no is checked, you need to continue through the following steps before moving on to the next section. But before we move on to like that next step, there's a little more information to think about when you're working on step 1. So you want to make sure that there's any new or existing diagnosis or health concern must be included in the ISP. These are identified in the ISP essential information, physical health and conditions section. It's also important to remember that supports need to be specific to each individual rather than applied across everyone in a service setting. So as you're completing step 1, you need to be thinking about current medical conditions, are there existing health protocols, what past medical conditions they have, hospitalizations, surgery, mental health, so on and so forth before you're moving on. So in step 2, it asks, are there any indicators occurring which might lead to, for example, a pressure injury for this individual, because we are on the pressure injury section of the risk awareness tool. So you're going down and we're tallying if any of these things apply to this individual. So it's important to remember that any potential risk identified should be confirmed by a qualified healthcare professional prior to an outcome being added in the ISP. So all that step 2 is saying that, well, they may not have been diagnosed with a pressure injury, but there's a potential that they could be at risk for a pressure injury. So we want to connect with a qualified healthcare professional first to determine if this potential risk is going to be a valid risk. Once that conversation has happened and the physician has said yay or nay, our presentation will kind of show you what to do. But just because an identified risk or potential risk has been seen in step 2 does not necessarily mean that an outcome has to be created. We just want to identify whether or not there is a potential for that there. And the other one is just a quick reminder to be thinking about all service settings that someone receives supports in. So then we move on to step 3. So if risk factors have been identified in step 2, a conversation with a qualified healthcare professional is recommended. If no risk has been identified, you need to go on to the next section. So that would be, they didn't meet anything in 1, so or in step 2, and so we're moving on. But in step 3, if they've met something in step 2, we have to contact a qualified healthcare professional, and then we're going to determine who's going to help us contact that qualified healthcare professional and when that's going to happen. So if you remember on the previous slides, we said one of the things that the tool is going to do is kind of create that accountability loop. So who's going to be the person that's going to help us? Who's that healthcare professional going to be? And when are we going to try to get that contact made? So in the original version of this form, the option to kind of opt out of the referral with a qualified healthcare professional was omitted. However, the most recent version, and the version that if you don't have your own kind of provider made version of this form that you should be using, is the 1020 version of this form. And on the RAD itself, it gives you the option to decline the referral to a qualified healthcare professional. And there's 2 check boxes there. You can decline the referral because there's currently a support plan and or protocol in place, or other. So if a person declines the referral, the team should confirm that the current ISP addresses the potential risk by selecting currently have a support plan or protocol option. When the current plan does not address the potential risk as indicated by other, the team should discuss ways the person's safety can be assured under current services. So that's how we kind of work this same process through all of the sections of the risk awareness tool. Then we move on to the last piece of completing the tool, and that is the summary page. And this lists section A all the way through section K, and you have the option to select whether or not a new diagnosis, a potential risk was identified, and if a referral to a QHP was made by checking these boxes. Don't forget that the support coordinator should sign and date to finalize this, and then this is what's required to be currently uploaded into WAMS. It's just the summary page. You can upload the whole tool, but what's really required is just for the summary page to be uploaded. So here's just kind of a closer view of what the summary page kind of looks like. The summary must be completed at the end of the review to indicate the actions taken for that section. So for example, with pressure injury, a potential risk was identified and this person was referred to a qualified healthcare professional. We have a support coordinator signature and date. So let's just suppose that a potential risk was identified and we had a conversation with a qualified healthcare professional. And once that potential risk has been confirmed, then what are we needing to do? We need to complete a progress note. We need to update the essential information, and we also need to add any outcomes and supports as needed. And this is what this kind of looks like within the ISP. It's important to remember that the referral to the qualified healthcare professional should happen as soon as possible, and that all efforts and plans, delays, or encountered should be documented because we want those referrals to take place as quickly as they can. So let's just suppose that the consultation is declined. What do we do then? So step 2 indicated that a potential risk was identified. We need to make a referral to a qualified healthcare professional, but for some reason that referral to speak to that QHP has been declined. So what do we need to do? We need to ensure that health and safety is met by currently provided supports, or, and with the person's agreement, update supports to mitigate the risk, which can be adjustments to the support instructions in the throughout the day section of the Part 5, under existing instructions for established support activities, or by adding support activities under the routine health and safety life area. Do not include any risk mitigation that must be ordered by a qualified medical professional unless you have an order to do so. And make sure to include monitoring and any emergency response steps that will be taken within the ISP. So essentially, we can't have a potential risk that's been identified. The referral to the qualified healthcare professional doesn't happen, and then there's no follow-up. There's no nothing there. It's kind of like we created a new hole in the Swiss cheese. So that's kind of why we need to have something in the plan that's going to support monitoring and what we're going to do in an emergency situation. So the example, the example on the screen in front of you shows that we've selected other, and that Joshua agrees with providers offering reminders to slow down when eating, to not stuff his mouth, which will be added to the support instructions in his part 5. Monitoring and following agency procedures for emergencies will be added as well. And so with that, I'm going to go to the next slide and have Eric Williams hop in.
All right, thank you, Jessa. All right, so for those of you who think in flowcharts or like decision trees, we developed a few slides to kind of take Joshua's example and walk through the decisioning around how the plan is updated and how his risk is mitigated. So if we start at the top of this flowchart, you'll see in the green box, potential health risk identified. So we're going to ask next, has this been confirmed by a qualified professional? If it has, then you'll go through the process that you see to the left-hand side, which is it's addressed currently. We have a note. It's in the essential information. We have outcomes and support, so we can stop. It is already taken care of in the plan, and he is supported with it. Now, if it has not yet been confirmed by a qualified professional, we're going to move to the right after the green box. And we're going to say consultation is recommended because there are risk factors at play that he needs support with. And so there's a decision point that you see where it says consultation accepted. So Joshua would either say, yes, I agree to go see a qualified professional for this, or I say no. So we're gonna assume he says yes in this example. So if he says yes and he gets the referral to the qualified professional, that professional will make a determination about whether or not there is a diagnosis and whether or not that risk is related to that diagnosis. So if it is related and that risk is confirmed by the qualified professional, then you would move over to the left and go through the process of adding an outcome to the plan. You would complete a progress note. You would update the essential information and make sure that all the supports are reflected in relation to that outcome. So you would modify the plan by way of an outcome change. If the qualified professional says no, that is not confirmed, and those risks still exist, there still is an expectation that even under the general health and safety outcome in the plan, that the activities or the support instructions are sufficient to address or mitigate that risk. So in this example, if consultation is not accepted or the qualified professional does not confirm, then we're going to discuss ways that the person's health and safety is met by currently provided supports. And then we would say, is the risk addressed sufficiently as plans are currently written? If they are, then you're good, you can stop. If they are not currently addressed, then the providers would need to adjust the existing support instructions and or support activities under that general healthy living or safety life area in their part 5. So on the next slide, it shows you Joshua's example. And the risks that were identified as the potential risks that were identified in this plan were coughing while eating and eating too much quickly. So if the risks are confirmed and you travel down the left-hand side of the flow chart, you'll see that part 3 has an outcome. The part 5s have activities and instructions under the outcome, and that they were developed per the qualified professional's finding. If the consultation was not accepted or not confirmed by a qualified professional, you're going to move to the right. You'll notice the orange boxes reflect that monitoring the potential risk is needed. So the part 5 activities and instructions have to be updated to address So for example, the instructions might say, provide Joshua reminders to slow down when he's eating, provide an emergency response as needing, should he demonstrate extended coughing or choking while eating. So you would include that in the instructions. So the main determiner here is if it's confirmed or identified, there must be an outcome. If it is not confirmed by a qualified professional, but those potential risks still exist, they must be mitigated through the instructions and the support activities in the Part 5. All right, so on the next slide, we'll take a look at the rat findings. So you'll see in this example that Joshua did not have a diagnosis of aspiration pneumonia. So they went through and answered the potential indicators. There were 2 that were identified with the check marks. And even though Joshua had not been diagnosed with aspiration and pneumonia in the last 12 months, he still had 2 common indicators for aspiration pneumonia. So there's still that expectation that the instructions and the activities under general health and safety mitigate those risks, potential risks, because they exist. So you can't not address them or let them go unaddressed. All right, on the next slide, you'll see that the outcome in this example, Joshua does have an outcome for choking, so that would tell us it is confirmed by a qualified professional, because you must have an outcome if it is confirmed by a qualified professional. If it is not confirmed by a qualified professional or consultation is declined, you could see a general health and safety outcome there at the top of the form on the left-hand side. Regardless, you would see the activities and or the support instructions adjusted to reflect the mitigation of those potential risks. So if the individual declined the referral to the qualified professional, here you see they checked other. It says Joshua agrees with offering reminders to slow down when eating and not stuff his mouth, which will be added to the support instructions in his Part 5. Monitoring and following agency procedures for emergencies will be added as well. So in this example, it could be under the general health and safety and addressed under the activities and the instructions to mitigate those potential risks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Eric. So before we move on, just a couple of helpful hints, or in closing, just a couple of helpful hints when completing the RAT. The first thing is to remember that the RAT is focused on new things that have been identified from the previous plan year. So the RAT assumes that previously known risks, so items older than a year old, have already been adequately addressed within the plan. Newly identified risks or potential risks need to be addressed when they are noted, whether at or before the annual meeting. And when a QHP has confirmed a potential risk as an actual risk, it must be addressed under an outcome in the ISP with related supports. When an individual declines that evaluation of any potential risk, you have to, again, confirm that adequate supports are in place and modify support instructions, et cetera, in the plan that Eric just discussed. So one caveat that I would like to throw out there to this is, while the RAT is focused on new things, in step 2, there are some chronic illnesses listed as potential indicators. That is not within the past plan year, okay? So those are chronic conditions that will inevitably always be identified as a potential risk on the risk awareness tool, but that's only those listed or identified in step 2. Other than that, the RAT is only going to be focused on a new diagnosis or new things. There is some flexibility regarding who the qualified healthcare professional can be. It can be a physician, it can be a nurse, or any other appropriate professional. So for example, some CSBs may have their own registered nurses who will connect with and help determine if an individual is at risk. You can also schedule appointments with primary care providers or other healthcare professionals, such as a physical therapist or a speech language pathologist. There are other folks that can help determine whether or not an individual is at risk for something. So the qualified healthcare professional doesn't necessarily have to be the primary care professional. And then there is some flexibility regarding the completion of the target date. And that is, especially during COVID, it was extremely difficult to get physician appointments. So we know there has to be some flexibility as to when that happens. The only thing that we want to be concerned about is that it doesn't take a whole year, hopefully, to get in and get that appointment scheduled. So for example, if the ISP meeting is being held 2 months before the individual's annual physical is scheduled, unless there's like a significant change in the person's status, the contact with the healthcare professional could occur at the annual physical, as an example. If the target date cannot be met within the first quarter, you need to document that the target date is set to be met within the second quarter via the upcoming PCR, and note that the target date has been accomplished in the second PCR, so that there is some follow through as to when this referral is going to happen and it doesn't just get dropped completely. We also have an FAQ document that's posted online with the risk awareness tool. And based on the feedback and questions that we get from today's training and next week's training, we can update that accordingly. If you still have additional questions about the risk awareness tool and how to complete it, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else in the Office of Integrated Health or Eric and his team for how to complete the risk awareness tool or any questions. Now, I have done a number of trainings with other CSBs, and so if you feel that your CSB needs some additional support, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Having said all of that, that concludes our training for today on the risk awareness tool. I want to thank you guys so much for your time and attention. And before you exit the training, if you have any questions, please make sure to put that in the chat box so that we can compile the answers to those questions and send that out for everyone. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hey,
Bye,
Jessa.
guys. Yes.
One question. Are we going to provide slides for this or just the recorded training that will be posted once
We're gonna,
we're done?
at this time, we're just going to provide the recorded training.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you
Okay,
all.
you guys, thank you so much. Make sure to get your questions in the chat box so we can get those answered. And have a good rest of your day. Bye.